Pitt lunged at his own child, and Jolie grabbed him from behind to stop him. Hey everybody, it's Harvard lawyer Lee. A few months back, I did a video about Brad Pitt's lawsuit against his ex-wife, Angelina Jolie. And I did a title something like, "Is this the next Depp v. Heard?" And I think my thought at the time was, well, okay, so it's a little bit of clickbait. It's probably not Depp v. Heard. Well, we now have Angelina Jolie's cross-complaint against Brad Pitt. And let me tell you what, I think it's in the running. Please drop in your comment. Do you think this is the next Depp v. Heard? I'd be really interested to know what you think after you've heard about the facts. And let's start off with what Brad Pitt's case was against Angelina Jolie. The two of them owned a home and winery in France together. Now, this wasn't just a winery that they owned, just a business. It was their family home. And they not only lived there with their family, but they even got married there. So it had a personal significance to it too. After they got divorced, the two of them still owned this winery together. Brad Pitt says he originally paid for 60% of it, and Angelina Jolie put in 40%. Now, they didn't own it technically individually. They owned it through companies. According to Brad Pitt's complaint, right before their wedding, he gifted Angelina Jolie another 10%. At that point in time, they each owned 50% of the winery. Now, Brad Pitt says after that point, he continued to put money in, and he put in a lot more than Angelina Jolie did. And he also says he put in a lot of effort, that one of his main jobs during this period was trying to make a go of the winery. And he says, I was unbelievably successful. It's not just a winery now. It has a world-class rosé, and it's worth, according to him, hundreds of millions of dollars. He claims there was an understanding between Brad and Angelina that neither one would sell to an outsider unless they got approval from the other person or the right of first refusal. Then came the divorce, and afterwards, Angelina Jolie sold her part to a Russian oligarch billionaire, Yuri Shefler. Brad is up in arms. Brad says this is an inappropriate partner. He's Russian and tied into Putin. So let's dive into the specifics of what she says. And trust me, it gets way more salacious than this as she describes the fight between Brad, Angelina, and the kids on an airplane. But let's talk about the agreement first. She says, we asked Brad to come up with a joint agreement about how we would solve things if we ever needed to and we were split apart. Brad said that it wasn't necessary for two reasonable people to have such an agreement. Now, I'm just going to throw this out there. I guess this is not legal advice, but let me tell you what, if somebody ever tells you, oh, we're both reasonable people, we don't need any kind of agreement, that's terrible advice, terrible advice. Yes, you need an agreement. And they should have had one and they didn't. It would have saved a lot of trouble. So then Angelina Jolie also pushes back against Brad's argument that he put all his time into the winery and ought to be said to own more of it than she does. She says, look, we had a lot of stuff going on. We had, for example, 6 kids. We had a foundation, which I spent my time working on, and then we had the winery. So we divided our time. The fact that you put more time during the marriage into the winery doesn't mean you own more of the winery. It just means that's where you divided your time because we only had so much we could do. She also has a couple of funny paragraphs. They had what's pretty common argument over decorating the chateau and renovating the chateau. But it's kind of on a different Hollywood level, if you will, because she says that she had usually decorated her home, but Brad wanted creative control. And I love this sentence. While Jolie would have preferred a more collaborative approach, she acquiesced to Pitt's desire to take control over the project, although she sometimes questioned why, for example, the chateau needed a 5th pool. At the cost of 1 million euros, or why the same staircase needed to be rebuilt 4 times. If Jolie ever questioned such expenditures, Pitt defended them as critical to his vision for the chateau. And I can picture your average everyday argument over whether or not you really needed the new sofa, the new refrigerator. Pretty different level, but the same argument that a lot of people have in a marriage. She then goes into the reason that she separated from Brad. She talks about the fact that they are on an overseas flight to Los Angeles. The whole family has been at Chateau Miraval, and now they're flying back. So they've got their kids who were between the ages of 8, 15, Jolie and Pitt, all on the airplane. And this is what she said. As documented in a lengthy and detailed FBI report, Pitt's aggressive behavior started even before the family got to the airport, with Pitt having a confrontation with one of the children. An hour and a half later, Pitt abruptly walked over to Jolie demanding, "Come here," and directed her to the back of the plane. He pulled her into the bathroom and began yelling at her. Pitt grabbed Jolie by the head and shook her, and then grabbed her shoulders and shook her again before pushing her into the bathroom wall. Pitt then punched the ceiling of the plane numerous times, prompting Jolie to leave the bathroom. As she exited, one of the children asked, "Are you okay, Mommy?" Pitt yelled back, "No, Mommy's not okay," and started deriding Jolie with insults. When one of the children verbally defended Jolie, Pitt lunged at his own child, and Jolie grabbed him from behind to stop him. To get Jolie off his back, Pitt threw himself backwards into the airplane seats, injuring Jolie's back and elbow. The children rushed in and all bravely tried to protect each other. Before it was over, Pitt choked one of the children and struck another in the face. Some of the children pleaded with Pitt to stop. They were all frightened. Many were crying. With nowhere to go and to avoid Pitt's wrath, Jolie and the children sat still and silent under blankets. Nobody dared to go to the bathroom. Pitt periodically emerged from the back of the plane to yell and swear at them. At one point, he poured beer on Jolie. At another, he poured beer and red wine on the children. After many tense hours, Pitt finally fell asleep. So the scene she's describing on the airplane is just utter chaos, with the family, all the children upset, everybody's crying, there's yelling. It's just utter chaos. And she's describing this as entirely Brad Pitt's fault, his doing. Then she says she arranged for separate transportation, and after they landed, Jolie cautioned the children that no matter what Pitt did, they should not intervene. She then went to wake Pitt up. Do you wonder why? Why are we waking him up? He's asleep. Let him sleep. But no, she went to wake him up and told him that she and the children were going to a hotel. Pitt once again screamed at her and pushed her down yet again. He shouted that nobody was getting off the plane and prevented the family from deplaning for about 20 minutes. After a child intervened and demanded to leave, Pitt finally relented. But once outside the plane door, Pitt again physically abused one of their children. He also grabbed and shook Jolie by the head and shoulders, causing one of the children to beg, "Don't hurt her." He let Jolie go, but then called her a B word before adding, F you all. Jolie and the children then left and made it to a hotel. 5 days later, on September 19th, 2016, Jolie filed for divorce. And then she goes into discussing an FBI investigation of this, which, by the way, resulted in no charges. And no charges were ever levied against Pitt or Jolie, and there were allegations that both had been involved in this. And Pitt was never brought to any consequences for what she says was his conduct. So immediately you wonder how the trial would work, because Pitt and Jolie have been extremely protective of their children. And there's no way really to litigate that without asking the children what happened, because you're going to have a he said, she said, and the tiebreakers are going to be the other people who are there. Now, there may well have been flight attendants or other people who would have witnessed part of it, but some of it would come down to what the testimony of the children would be. And I know they would be very reluctant to put them on the stand. Now, she then talks about the fact that after the divorce, most of her funds were tied up in Chateau Miraval. Despite Jolie having the exact same ownership interest as Pitt, he started excluding Jolie from any meaningful input in the management and direction of the business. Over time, he completely froze her out and largely cut her off from receiving information about its finances. She says he wouldn't distribute the profits, he reinvested them all, and he got substantial leverage and control over her as a result. And she threw this sentence in. It's pretty big dig at Pitt. By 2019, Jolie was growing increasingly uncomfortable with continuing to participate in an alcohol-related business, given the impact of Pitt's acknowledged problem of alcohol abuse on their family. She says, despite this, she saw Brad Pitt as the obvious choice for sale since he was so into the winery. So she said over the years, she initially put $40 million in cash in, and then twice put $10 million of reinvested profits in. So she had a total of about $60 million in the chateau. She says they reached an agreement in principle for her to sell her interest to Brad Pitt for $54.5 million, which she says was less than what she had put into it. And the negotiators, she said, exchanged congratulations. Yay, we have a deal. But 1 month later, she submitted an offer of proof regarding domestic violence in their divorce case. She was offering to prove, I assume it would be, the airplane incident. And it says the filing apparently enraged Pitt, and in response, his team notified her team that Pitt was stepping back from the deal. So she says, why did he not do this? The reason is because he didn't like the fact that I was going to tell the court about what he had done on the airplane. She made a last and final proposal. He still wouldn't accept it. And she said at the time, I'm going to consider and pursue other options if you don't take it. On June 2nd, he sent a revised agreement. She says for the first time, he asked her to be bound by a non-disparagement clause that will prevent her from discussing outside of court his conduct toward her and toward the family. She says this was unfair. She says she turned it over to her representative, said, you find any deal you can that's reasonable for me. And she says she told Pitt she was doing it. Then on June 30th, she says she notified the court that she had located a potential buyer. Jolie says, okay, yes, I sold to the Russian who owns Stoli Group. They make Stoli vodka. She says that's a perfect solution because he has plenty of capital and he even has experience in this exact field, which is selling alcohol products. So he's the perfect partner, she says. And Brad Pitt says, I had rejected him as a partner. She says, you never told me that. You never mentioned to me at all that he was interested in buying it, let alone that you had rejected an offer. I had no idea. So I sold to him my half. Jolie then goes into the fact that the first time she ever heard that there was this agreement, according to Pitt, between them that she would offer to him first or sell only to him, the first time she ever heard that was in the press. Her exact statement is, the fact of the matter is that there is no such agreement and there never was one. Jolie says, I offered it to you first, you turned it down, and Stoli offered me $67 million, which was $12.5 million more than you were going to pay. So it's all your fault anyway, she says, because you said it wasn't necessary for two reasonable people to have such an agreement. Angelina Jolie's argument is that this all relates to the non-disparagement clause. The only reason that Brad didn't buy this is because he wanted a non-disparagement clause that would prevent him from the embarrassment of being exposed for what he did to me, to the family on the airplane. And that non-disparagement clause is the reason that the deal fell apart between Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt to sell Chateau Miraval. She then asked for declaratory relief. What declaratory relief is? A declaration. It's not money. It just is a statement, a declaration by the court. They dispute, she says, whether Brad Pitt has a consent or a veto right for Angelina Jolie's sale of her half of Chateau Miraval. She wants the court to say, no, Brad doesn't have any right to control what she does. She also says we have a dispute about whether my sale to the Russian oligarch through his company Tenute Del Mondo, whether that's a valid and final sale, and she wants the court to say, yes, it is. The third thing she says is that Brad Pitt wants to say that he has a consent or veto right to her sale, but that all of that is unconscionable and void, and against public policy, even if he had a right like that, because of the fact he was trying to incorporate and include a non-disparagement agreement. That's the cross complaint that she has against Brad and his company. So let me know, what do you think? Is it as interesting as Depp v. Heard? Do you think it could get just as much attention and be just as interesting? Let me know in the comments. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And be sure to like and subscribe.